Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining me tonight. Would you all please, for those who are just joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us. And would you please subscribe to my channel? I'd really appreciate it. Now, tonight, I'm so excited. We have Jason McLeod. He has written a book called Dark Siege. And he's got an awesome story to tell us. And well, everybody, let's welcome Jason to the show. Welcome, Jason, to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, Jason, I have some questions I'd love to ask you, but I know the viewers are waiting to hear your story on this novel that you've written.
Okay. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has, of course yours as well. Dark Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, is actually right now the #1 bestseller in occultism on Amazon.com, and I'm very pleased with that, of course. And I think I'm ranked #2 in Supernatural and like 8 in Ghosts and Haunted Houses all at the same time. And it's a fascinating case, and I've been here in Salem, Massachusetts since September 30th at the Museum Place Mall, and where I'm selling and signing copies of my books. And it's been an amazing time, and Salem is just an amazing place to be, especially in the Halloween season. But I just left there, so I'm doing the interview from, since I just left there. And as I tell people that come up to my table, I said it is the most fascinating, intriguing, and frightening case that I've ever investigated in 28 years. Since I first started delving into the paranormal with my mentors, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I'm very happy to be able to call myself, have them be my mentors. And who better could you possibly have to, take you under their wing and explain, the ins and outs of the paranormal and the supernatural realm than, Ed Warren, the late Ed Warren, who's one of 7 demonologists, and Lorraine Warren, of course, is a light trance medium and is still very active, and who is the pillar of the whole paranormal investigation community to this day. And but I started investigating with them, and I'm not sure if you want me to talk about that or if you just want me to delve right into the book, but I guess for a change of pace, I'll go right into the book.
I would love that.
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in English creative writing, so I've coupled my writing experience with my paranormal experience, and I wrote about this case because it was the most intriguing and frightening and fascinating case because of the activity that happened in the case, and we'll go into great detail about that stuff. But it's 467 pages, and an outstanding cover artist. It's Dark Siege, Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, which is volume 1. And for people listening now, you can pull it up on Amazon.com and check out my ratings and my rankings. I have 101 reviews, almost all 5 stars, which is great. But basically, I became aware of this case just after I had graduated college and had come back to the East Coast. And I put flyers out for a seminar I was doing in Westport called Transcendence. And it was all about spirituality and so forth. But I became aware of the case when I first received a phone call from a woman who was absolutely trembling, and her voice was just trembling and trying to tell me about the horrific things they were experiencing in the house. And I knew immediately that we were dealing with something that was demonic and something very, very vicious. And of course I said I'd be right over as soon as I could possibly get there. But they had considerable difficulty getting a hold of me, as is the case. It's very common when you have spirits of this nature because they don't want the family involved to make connections. It's like having a burglar snip your telephone wires to prevent you from calling the police. I'm using the old terminology and the old technology because that's what it was like in '93 when this took place. I changed some dates around, of course, and of course the names of the family members and their last name, and some locations, of course, just so it doesn't, nothing comes back to haunt them, so to speak, which is what exactly happens later, as we'll discuss. But I knew the very serious nature of the situation, so I immediately packed everything up and went over to the house And as soon as I answered, rang the bell, this woman comes out on her hands and knees, coming out the front door, grasping for my legs, just begging for help, and just weeping and saying, "Thank God, thank God." And she'd just been attacked in her art studio, and viciously. And she was an artist, and her painting was defaced when her hand was seized by this entity. And this is not the third time that that type of activity had happened to her. And very, very terrified, of course, because it just didn't seem to let up. But get back to the garbled, or back to the lack of ability to get a hold of me. They had garbled phone lines, garbled messages on the other end, busy signals, out of service tones and messages, growling, and of course I never received anything on my end, and that's very common. And again, it's these spirits not wanting you to make connection with anybody who can in any way help you. And so it was just absolutely dreadful. But then I went in and of course checked out the art studio, and I had two people with me. One was my photographer, and the other one was another investigator. But we checked it out, and she was just absolutely at her wit's end. And they tried so desperately to get a hold of me, and also with this woman who is now my friend. She was a psychic that one of the family friends discovered through a flyer of her own, advertising psychic fairs, and the same exact type of blocked phone lines and messages and growls occurred when they tried to get a hold of her. And the only reason actually she was able to get through to me, she said, is because when she just finally broke down and said, "Please, Jesus, help me, get through." And these spirits of this nature want no part of that. And, the blockage is cleared up. So, to arrive in a situation where a woman had just been attacked by invisible spirits who hate you with every fiber of their existence is a really sobering thing to witness. But I'd witnessed it many times before through all of my experiences working with the Warrens and so forth, and going into demonically infested houses with that, and cases that I had worked on in Washington State where I was in college. But that was just dreadful. And the story was behind this case, it originated back at Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. It was just before Halloween, and it was this same woman who was, the mother, who was driving along in her black Mercedes station wagon with the little 6-year-old girl, Kelly, in the back seat, just before Halloween, and it was getting very stormy. The leaves were, whipping all over the place, and, Linda, since it was so close to Halloween, just kind of toyed around and said, "Be very watchful, Kelly, maybe we'll see a ghost." Oh. We wouldn't want it to follow us home, would we? Giggling. Yeah. And the little girl who's sitting on the right side of the car in the rear seat, is just cringing and saying, "Mommy, that's scary," But then what did she start doing but looking out into the tombstones as they were passing by Union Cemetery, looking for a spirit. And it turns out that Kelly is actually clairvoyant, as was the mother, and simply because she's an artist. And Ed always used to say there are very few artists who haven't told me a ghost story, because, artists are very sensitive people. They're tapping in, using their higher consciousness and so forth to tap into different realms that give them inspiration and so forth. But the little girl saw this spirit, this black form, she called it, deeper in the cemetery, and it's raining and it's getting really windy out, and she's peering through the glass of her rear side window and seeing this shape turn into the shape of a man, a black shape of the upper torso, arms and legs and a head. And, she's just absolutely starting to get petrified. But then she notices that the spirit was walking or floating through the gravestones. So it was definitely not a physical being, toward the car. And on its way to intercept the car is driving very slowly down the road because the rain started to really pour down in buckets. And, as this spirit is approaching the car, Kelly is sinking deeper and deeper into her seat, absolute terror. Of course, the mother doesn't see a thing because she's focused on driving safely. But when it came up to the rear window of the car, well, actually, the car passed the spirit. It walked or floated into the road and looked right at her But then it reappeared closer to the car and disappeared again and reappeared again closer to the car as the car was moving slowly away, and to the point where it actually disappeared, and Kelly thought it was over. When they arrived at a stop sign, she was absolutely terrified that the thing was going to come right up to the back of the car, and it didn't. But when they turned on Stepney Road, they noticed it taking a shortcut through the cemetery to intercept the car as it went further up the road, and that's exactly what it did. And it came right up behind the rear window, and made that awful screeching sound that fingers on glass will make in a wet glass.
Yeah.
And she wailed, just screamed, and Linda cut the wheel, and there was slick, wet leaves all over the road, and she almost, the car spun around and around, didn't hit anything, but it spun around on the road, and, she's, of course, what is wrong, And she said, it's a ghost, just like you said, and she's like, oh, Kelly, there's no such thing as ghosts, Well, little did they know that the next morning, Linda would experience that very same spectral intruder in the home, in the kitchen, in the laundry room area, in the kitchen. And, that's where Linda really couldn't quite grasp that in her head, thinking that ghosts aren't real. I'm just, my eyes are playing tricks on me. And that's how all hauntings start. They start in your head. And, you start to really question your own sanity and so forth, and you try to make any excuse possible to try to determine and make the determination that it's not a real event taking place. It was when the 16-year-old brother, Tyler, and his two best friends got off the school bus that next morning, or that afternoon, that they had the house to themselves because Linda and her husband went off to Vermont to sell their artwork to a bed and breakfast up there, and Kelly stayed with Linda's good friend, and it was just Tyler and his two best friends who had the house to themselves that weekend. When they got off the bus on Friday afternoon and they were in the living room, Kyle, one of the two friends, pointed to this man, and this black-shaped man walking along the outside perimeter of the property, and they ran out after him, being the rambunctious 16-year-olds that they are, yelling and hollering, saying, hey, who's on our property? And when they ran out into the snow and looked back, they watched the sliding glass door close by itself. And they ran after to try to get to the door, and it was locked. And then Tyler tried it, and it opened easily. So he thought that his friend was playing tricks on him, but it was actually the spirit involved that was playing tricks on them. And after many more experiences in the house, we can go into as much detail as you like, but they all heard the ghost story from Kelly the previous evening, and now Tyler, the 16-year-old brother, was really starting to believe that maybe this is a real haunting, and they experienced many really frightening things, and then they decided that they should go to the mall and buy a Ouija board.
Oh my God!
And that was the worst mistake they could have made. And one of the friends said those things are stupid, they don't work, and the other friend said, don't be such a bunch of wimps, let's go do it. And they really had no choice at that point. They wanted to make contact with the spirit in the house to find out what was going on, and they figured that was the only way to do it, because that's the only way they're really told we can do it, right? With TV commercials and everybody knowing about Ouija boards. And interestingly enough, about Ouija boards, I just attended as I said, I'm here in Salem, Massachusetts. I have been since September 30th, but I'm here until November 2nd. But Robert Murch is a friend of mine, and he had the great name called Chairman of the Board. But he and I had a very polite debate one night on Andrea Perrin and George Lopez's radio show called The Great Ouija Board Debate. And Robert Murch is a proponent of Ouija boards, meaning he thinks they're harmless, and has studied the history behind them, which admittedly is very interesting. And I'm completely against Ouija boards and say that they're the cause of 95% of all of the cases of demonic infestation. So, but I was just at one of his presentations last night here in Salem, and talking about the history of the Ouija board, and they had literally 200 Ouija boards brand new in boxes that anybody who attended the free seminar got to take home with them. And I'm just shaking my head, and I took some good photo ops where I'm just like, grabbing my forehead going, you've got to be kidding me. Because this is why this case in particular, this Dark Siege case, spiraled board is the most dangerous piece of negative occult paraphernalia in existence.
Right.
And is responsible for 95% of all of the cases of demonic infestation, oppression, and then, up to possession. But definitely the infestation aspect, where they actually are allowed entrance into the home. So I believe that they're dangerous because, sure, they can be used, they can be looked at as a tool or just a harmless game. But I believe you're using your God-given free will, which is immensely powerful, and you're attempting to initiate communication or a dialogue with an entity that you don't know where it exists, you don't know where it originates from, you don't know where it's currently residing, you don't know what it is, you don't know what its intentions are, and you don't know whether it's lying to you or not, if you happen to make communication where it's actually moving the planchette on the board. So it's just risk after risk after risk, and I say it's like using a bullhorn saying, come mess with my life. And also, I believe that you're not being possessed, but I believe you're actually invoking them, whatever spirit it is, to enter your body or at least manipulate or control your arms or your hands to move that planchette. Sometimes people think that there's somebody on the opposite side of the planchette moving it around with their fingertips. Mm-hmm. But I believe, what if there's really something that's actually seizing control of your arms or cohabitating your body and allowing the planchette to move?
Right.
Now you're issuing a blank. You're also issuing a blanket statement. Are there any spirits here who wish to communicate with me? Well, that's a great question, but where are the spirits defined in that question? What types of spirits are you talking about? Human spirits or inhuman spirits? Elementals or fairies, or whether those things exist or whatever. And also, where is here defined? In this room? In this house? On this property? In this town? In this state? In this country? On this continent? On this planet? In this dimension? In this density? In this vibration? In heaven? In hell? In this plane of existence? I mean, it's just a broad question. Are there any spirits anywhere in the multiverse, on any level, on any dimension, of any type, who want to come communicate? That's a pretty dangerous thing to ask. I mean, you talk about getting on the internet and going into a chat room where you can have any type of person in there conversing with you or your kids. It can be very, very, very frightening. And if you really saw what you're looking into, I also like it almost to like the Stargate movie or the show where you're actually dialing into some random system, using this gate. It could be anywhere, and that's what you can be tapping into. So you really have no idea what you're doing.
You know what, Jason? Let's talk about the Ouija board after we finish hearing the story, because there's a lot of questions about the Ouija board, and I have interviewed Robert Murch before, and I know about that radio show you did with Andrea and George as well. But let's finish this story, because it's really a great story, and for the viewers that mess with the Ouija board, this is a story you have to listen to. So go ahead, Jason.
Okay, so the teenagers bought the Ouija board. Well, first of all, they were at the mall and joking around in the toy store and looking at the board and hemming and hawing over it. And all of a sudden, they look over and there's this old woman standing next to them, with her little gold-rimmed glasses and a pink shawl, and she looked looking straight at them, and she said, "Boys, do yourselves a favor and put the game back on the shelf." And they just looked at their jaws dropped. They're like, what's this all about? And they look at each other and they giggle like, young teens do. And, making fun of the old lady, like, who's this old bat telling us what to do? And then they look back and she's completely gone without trace. Well, Tyler ran out of the store to try to find her because he thought that was just too much of a coincidence or synchronicity. But anyway, she was nowhere to be found. So they thought that was just really creepy. And then Tyler decided, let's put the board back. But by the time he found his friends, the store was closed, the lights were off, and they had the game inside the bag. So they went back home. Well, they got some pizzas and went back home and got some movies and everything. And they were going to make a night out of it. And they started using the board and trying to get questions answered. And basically, the spirit that they were speaking to discussed that it was after Kelly. Well, that, of course, the little 6-year-old, which is who followed her home from the cemetery because she made a connection with it. And, of course, that enraged Tyler, so he started challenging it. Show yourself if you're such a tough guy. You coward. You know, everything you absolutely should not do if you're speaking with entities on a Ouija board, because you're challenging that, you're provoking it, and you're saying by showing yourself, you're saying, come into my house, come into my reality, come into my, my awareness, and prove your existence. Well, it wasn't just the spirit that followed them home from the cemetery that they were speaking to at that point. If you look at today's surveillance society with the NSA spying on everybody's phone calls and text messages and stuff, and with the revelations of Edward Snowden, you know, there are many other intelligences taking a very active interest in the communication going on, especially when you're using a Ouija board. So there were other intelligences involved, and basically the older sister came home and, you know, made fun of the boys for playing a Ouija board and everything. I thought they were just making up lies and, you know, just trying to, you know, lure into some kind of, you know, scenario. So she went upstairs and didn't have anything to do with it, of course, and thought they were just being childish. But then they really started to get frightened, and the planchette would be moving by itself, and that scared them out of their minds. And they decided they were just going to quit for the night, and they, you know, Tyler kicked the board, and it went all the way across the living room and hit the sliding glass door, and then he went to bed. Well, you know, that evening, I'm sorry, I forgot a major point here.
Okay.
During the initial interaction, before they went and got the Ouija board, a stirrer cup, an aluminum stirrer cup full of stirrer sticks on the bar, started to vibrate and wobble and whisk itself off the top of the bar. So it didn't whisk itself off, but the entity used its ability to manipulate physical objects and moved it across the top of the bar. It was very lightweight, because the human spirit can lift about 2 pounds worth of weight. But then the alcohol liquor bottles behind the bar got rattled, and 1 or 2 broke, and others cracked. And when they were upstairs, they remembered that one of the bottles was cracked, and that they should just go ahead and drink it, because they're going to have to throw it out anyway. So they went and, you know, consumed some of the alcohol and so forth. You know, that's very important, because when you drink alcohol or do drugs, especially if you're not used to or accustomed to doing that much alcohol and so forth, it really wears down your aura and reaches your auric field and makes holes in your aura and makes you more vulnerable, which is a very important point to remember. But when they finally went to sleep, they woke up and the doorbell rang. You know, and they got roused out of their sleep, and then it rang a second time. And they said, what's going on? You know, did you tell anybody we're having a party or something like that? And Tyler says, yeah, right. You know, parents would kill him. And then brings a third time. So Tyler runs over to the window and looks out the window, you know, looking around for kids, playing pranks or doing something, and nobody's at the door. And then it rang a 4th time, and the elder sister comes barging in, screaming at them, saying, did you invite people over? Who's coming over at 3 a.m? And they look out. Sarah pushes Tyler out of the way and looks out, you know, to see who's down there, and shouts who's there. The doorbell keeps ringing, and, you know, she's about to just lose her mind right there. She says, why is the doorbell ringing? Where's everybody? It rings again and again, a total of 8 times. And so she decides to run downstairs, followed by the boys. It looks like the boys were more frightened than the older sister was.
Oh, hey, Jason,
open the door.
Jason,
yeah.
one second, please. Some viewers came in late. The viewers who came in late, Jason has written a novel called Dark Siege, and he's telling us the demonic haunting story of what happened to this family when the children used the Ouija board. So just if you want to just catch up with us, I mean, so go ahead, Jason.
Okay. The teenagers used the Ouija board in the house earlier in the evening, and now at 3 o'clock in the morning, these demonic entities were all announcing their arrival. And when they got downstairs, they noticed nobody was at the door ever. There were no footprints in the light snow that had been falling. And if you really understand what's going on here, imagine the most ghastly, evil, nasty-looking Halloween characters ringing a doorbell one by one as they decide to walk through the house, announce their arrival and walk through the house. So that's exactly what happened. As they walked in, they basically were entering the house at that point, 8 different intelligences. And we know they're demonic based on the activity that started to manifest shortly, immediately afterwards. So, they were all terrified, and Sarah quite, frankly thought that the boys just might have just done something to rig the doorbell to ring, and, which was ridiculous. But when they all basically, when Kyle walked back into the kitchen, the Ouija board was not back at the sliding glass door, but was right back in the position that they were using it in, and the planchette was spinning on its own. And when the rest of the guys and Sarah came in, they couldn't believe their eyes, and the planchette lifted off of the board, hovered there, and then whisked into the brick fireplace and shattered.
Oh my
and
God!
Sarah just wailed out of her mind, and Sarah wailed out of her mind and ran upstairs, and the boys followed, screaming, and they all went into Tyler's room and decided they would all spend the night together in the room there, and which was a very wise decision versus Sarah going off to be on her own, not understanding really what was going on. All they know is that they used the Ouija board, and now all these things started to happen. And the next morning, they woke up to an absolutely awful, horrible, rotting smell in the room that was just completely overpowering. And of course, they try to equate it to being natural human scents, parts and things like that, but it was in excrement and things like that. But it was absolutely horrific. They had to get out of the room completely. Even opening the window wouldn't dispel it. So they went out and they, ran downstairs, and basically the guys, they all decided to get out of the house and just, get some air and stuff. And when things like this happen, it's almost to the point where you just start to snap. You're like, let's just get out of here. You try to just forget about it. Yeah, go ahead.
So things got progressively worse in the home.
Oh yeah, that was just the beginning.
Yeah.
The guys went out to play football for the day, and then they went to a movie just to try to escape. And Sarah went off to riding practice. She was a horseback rider, and Tyler knew that their parents were coming home that evening. But so after I don't know how much time they left, but a half hour. So anyway, things got progressively worse. So I'm not going to go into exact timeline details, but things started to happen where the smells would return. Tyler and his friends put the Ouija board in the garbage can in the garage. And later that evening, after they'd gotten back, from the movies, Tyler went home, and he had the house to himself, and he was, pretty frightened. And then when Sarah came home, his older sister, he was relieved. And then when the family came home, they were really watching over Kelly, which was something that the parents didn't miss, because normally Tyler, being the older brother, teases his sister, especially about seeing a ghost. But when he got a phone call from Jimmy that evening, and Jimmy was just screaming at him, saying, "Why did you do it?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? Why did you put it in my book bag?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" The Ouija board was in Jimmy's book bag.
Oh.
And when they went to go check it in the garbage, it was missing from the garbage. And what happened in that case is that the demonic spirits already had an entryway into Tyler's house, the McLaughlin house. So they teleported it or moved it into, dematerialized it and rematerialized it into Jimmy's book bag in hopes that he would use it there to try to get answers, and therefore open a doorway into his house. But Jimmy was wise to that whole idea, and he said, "Of course I'm not going to use it." And then minutes later, it was back in the garbage can. Oh. So they knew that Jimmy wasn't going to play along, so they brought it back to where Tyler's house was, in the garbage can. And that, of course, just, you can't even imagine when you're dealing with something that's invisible, that has the power to move things back and forth and cause things to dematerialize and rematerialize. It really starts to really cause some serious mental anguish. And so things got progressively worse after that. It would reappear in Tyler's locker at the high school, and they used it there at the school to try to get more answers and discover who it is they're dealing with. Oh. And of course, at that point, you never know who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with the human spirit that originally followed them back from the cemetery, or are you dealing with one of the 8 different demonic spirits that entered the house? Of course, they didn't know it was that many. They didn't really put 2 and 2 together. It was the bishop that really put that together, and the demonologist involved that came later. But things would just start to happen, and Linda would hear whispers and hear a voice being called. She would feel the temperatures completely plummet to ice-cold temperatures to the point where you'd see her breath, and felt like she was being strangled from behind.
Yeah.
she tried to call her husband, who was a real estate broker, and he basically just didn't have anything to do with it. He said, come on. You know, he really started to get upset, thinking that she's just making things up. But it was the family friend who actually found the flyer, who remembered seeing the flyer for the psychic fair that eventually led to the woman who is now my friend, the psychic, Yvonne, to get involved, who happened to know another demonologist. And this was not Ed and Lorraine Warren, but they were two different people and very similar in many ways. But who also had a connection with a Catholic bishop who got involved. And what was very fascinating is, you know, things, they would try to go get help, and it seemed like they would just be thwarted at every turn. They would try to reach out for help, and the lines would be garbled. The phone lines would just never connect. And of course, neither Yvonne or I would hear anything on our end. And I think, like I told you in the beginning, when we first started discussing it, then only when she basically pleaded for help from Jesus, you know, Jesus, please help me get through, you know, did the phones clear up. But I became aware of the situation when I arrived. She had been attacked. Linda had been attacked in her art studio. She was painting. She tried to just clear her mind and paint. And she was painting a scene, and then she felt the temperature drop again and felt this presence, because this is about the third time she'd been experiencing these things where she'd just feel a presence watching her, and she'd hear her name being called out, and then feeling her hand being seized. But imagine like a really ice-cold, slithering type of hand coming up over your hand and seizing control of it at the wrist and over the hand itself, and actually causing her to deface her own painting that she'd been working on for a couple hours, writing curse words and things like that on there, and then throwing her to the ground. And, you know, she thought she'd be strangled or smothered, of course, but then she heard the doorbell ring, which was me ringing the doorbell. And she literally crawled out on her hands and knees in a complete daze, trying to get to the foyer. And then when she finally opened the door, literally crawled out on her hands and knees and grasped at her ankles and just said, please, please, thank God, you know. And that was just heart-wrenching, like I said in the first segment. But we went in, the painting was defaced. And we just basically, I conducted everything according to the protocol that I learned from my mentors, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and followed their procedure even to this day. And I think it's a very sound procedure, and they should be lauded as the pioneers of the whole modern ghost investigation craze. I say ghost investigation instead of ghost hunting, because we don't hunt humans, so what are we hunting human spirits for?
Right.
So, demons, yeah, but you're not really hunting any demon spirits, I can tell you that. They're the ones that are going to be hunting you, because they're the invisible beings with incredible power, and, you know, even if you're armed with the knowledge of what they can do, you're really in really deep trouble. So
well, they had what, flies came into the house, and flies came in, and her bed levitated. She had to hold on, and I guess the boys came in running to try and hold it down. They saw these black mists in the house, and then didn't she also see a 7-foot-tall black spirit with a robe? That would have scared the hell out of me. You all saw it?
It manifested, and when we spotted it, you had the incredible smell of sulfur. That's a classic demonic materialization. Is you have a really bad smell of sulfur, and, you know, often something even worse, like a smell of excrement or just something awful. And then it was right there. It wasn't like it was slowly forming. It was like, boom, right there.
Oh, my God.
And we'd all noticed it, and it just went right up through the ceiling. And then we made it. Tyler, you know, we're all just dumbfounded. And Tyler said, Mom! You know, it went right up into what would be the upstairs hallway, right near the mother's bedroom. And that's when you hear this blood-curdling scream upstairs.
Oh, my God.
And we all ran up to get to her. But it had something, I mean, it was really after Linda. We thought it would be after Kelly at first, and then Tyler, but then it went after Linda. And they always go after the person who's the most vulnerable. And it's usually the weakest member of the family unit, which is somebody who's, you know, very emotionally unstable, or somebody getting into drugs or alcohol or messing around with, witchcraft or black witchcraft or seances or Ouija boards or any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The one that would always be considered to be the scapegoat. Not that Linda was any type of those people, but it just systematically went after everybody in a specific way. And with the flies, it was just one fly coming up through the drain in the kitchen, and then 2, and then 5, and then 10, and then a whole swarm of them. Now, the interesting thing was, though, it was never physical flies. This was an illusion that these demonic spirits can broadcast right into your head.
Oh, my God.
And have everybody experience it, have one person experience it, so that person's ready to snap, and everybody else will believe them. But what really was amazing was the whole swarm of flies turned out to be an illusion, according to the bishop, and the demonologist. But when they actually had one, and this goop was coming out from underneath the bottom of the sink.
Oh, yeah. What is that?
Sarah's boyfriend, Bill, went to go touch it. And of course, Tyler said, "Are you crazy? You know what that stuff is." But it hardened, and Bill wedged a piece of it up with a butter knife, and it snapped and ricocheted and went out on the kitchen floor.
Oh, my God.
And he said, we have some evidence. Now we have evidence, And they stuck it in a baggie, a little plastic baggie, and he put it in his pocket. And then while it's in his pocket, as a hard chunk of, taffy, it just started to, and he felt it in his pocket, and he pulled it out, and there was a fly.
Oh, my God.
No hard taffy, but a fly, and he stomped on it with his boot, and looked down, and then held the bag up, and there was not a trace of anything inside the bag.
Oh,
no guts,
my God.
Veins, no nothing, and no taffy.
Oh.
So that's the type of stuff that causes you to just go, you're going to snap. And what was the most fascinating thing in the whole case to me was when, we had everybody getting involved, and basically the family fled the house twice, and we came in one morning and walked into the kitchen, and there in the center of the kitchen floor on the linoleum was a big old pile of rotting, moldy, absolutely putrid-smelling stuff. And it was every bit of organic food matter from the refrigerator piled out onto the floor, and every container inside the refrigerator was perfectly arranged like they'd been left, but absolutely spotless, like you'd wash them in the washing machine.
Oh, my God.
Not one trace of anything in there in the refrigerator, but empty containers, and all the stuff was on the floor. And even if that wasn't amazing enough, there's no way it would rot and mold like it'd been sitting there for months. And it was absolutely putrid, and Linda came into her kitchen, and what are you going to do? All of their dishes were destroyed at one point. They had silverware flying all over the place, and it was just absolutely crazy.
Oh, my God.
And the big problem is when you have the teenagers. You have Tyler and Kyle and Jenny and Sarah, the older sister. They knew full well that they used the Ouija board, right?
Yeah.
And they had an immense amount of guilt, saying, "Did we cause this to happen?" Because everybody heard stories, and then so they didn't want to tell Linda, the mother. They absolutely didn't want to tell the father, Matt. And Linda was experiencing things on her own and tried to reach out to her husband, and he said, "Oh, Linda, come on," And then Julie, the family friend, who was about 10 years older, they went out to a Barnes & Noble to try to find books and find out what was going on. But by bringing those books back into the house, that was like having ammunition against the demonic spirit. It was almost like a direct challenge. So they almost actually had a horrendous car accident on the way out to go to find these books, but that was thwarted, and by the actual spirit of the human spirit that was in the house, we found out. So you have the kids not wanting to tell the mother not trying to tell the husband, but being completely frustrated because he won't even believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You have the mother trying not to upset Kelly, the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody trying to protect Kelly, of course, because she's so young and fragile, 6 years old. And the friends trying to help, and it was a real testament to the friendship of the three boys, because they could have easily just said, I'm out of here, you have a good time dealing with this, I'm not going to, call me when it's all over. But they really hung in with each other and really,
So at what point, when was the demonologist brought in, and you had, did you have a couple of psychics come in as well?
Yeah, Yvonne, who's a friend of mine now, and she's recently passed, but she came in and very sensitive and was able to, okay, we'll go back up to Linda. Actually, as soon as they made a phone call connection, I forgot I had to back up, I'm sorry. Matthew, they all started experiencing things together in the living room. Horrendous booming and banging, so it sounded like a wrecking crew was coming through and just smashing the house to bits, and scared them all out of their minds. And Matthew challenged them. This is my house. You get out. You want to mess with somebody, you mess with me. Well, he directly challenges the demonic spirits, and that's exactly what they wanted him to do. He also burned his hand on the doorknob. He went to go open the door to get out, and he literally burned his hand on a doorknob with that, and had blisters all over his hands.
Oh, my God.
And one hand. But he challenged them, and as soon as he challenged them, he instantly vomited. He instantly got incredibly sick and ended up vomiting, and there was all kinds of things happening inside the living room until the point where they fled the house. And, Matthew is just about ready to snap. It's one thing to know that demonic spirits exist and know, what their capabilities are, and then be attacked by them, and then be able to say, all right, I know these things happened. This is how I burned my hand. This is how I was attacked. It's another thing entirely to entirely disbelieve and have no understanding that these things even exist, and then be viciously assaulted by them. By one is enough, but by many is enough to cause people to completely lose their minds altogether. But so they all experience things, and then things are just getting progressively worse. And at one point, when Linda actually, Matthew got very sick, Sarah actually broke her arm on her horse. Her horse got spooked while she was riding the horse, and which was definitely related to the spirits that wanted to cause the injury. But when they went to the, Matthew came home from work very ill, and it looked like he had the flu, and he was just really, really very sick. And then they got word that that Sarah broke her wrist, and then they had to go to the hospital. So they went to the hospital, and that's where Matthew collapsed right there, and they basically put him into, emergency, and with severe pneumonia. And so everything was just totally collapsing instantly. And then when we were back at the house, sitting in there in the kitchen, and the phone rang, and Linda got a call from the doctor. Well, it wasn't the medical doctor that she was anticipating hearing from when they said that, I believe your husband's in serious danger. It was the parapsychologist, this doctor that is portrayed as Dr. Vincent Decker, this parapsychologist, demonologist. And as soon as she got off the phone and basically started to announce that's who it was, she literally lifted off the ground probably about 2 inches, and looked like she was being just totally choked from behind.
Oh my God.
Gasping and hacking and stuff. And it's classical demoniacal retribution. Once you reach out and you make connections with somebody who can help you, you're instantly punished for it in cases like this. And we had to actually cast holy water on her and pray over her and so forth. And she ran out of there and ran upstairs into the shower and locked the door. And I ran up after her, and I begged and pleaded that she didn't lock the door in case she was attacked in there. We wouldn't be able to get to her. But she did anyway. But then while she's in the bathroom, she heard the finger sliding down on the mirror, in a wet mirror, the steam-soaked mirror, and that awful sound.
Yes.
And it wrote on the mirror, and no peace, backwards. And when she got out of the shower, she didn't want to look. She just knew it was going to be something awful, and she just tried to clear her mind and take a shower and just get she felt like she'd been violated when she was, groped from behind her on her neck and so forth. But when she finally came out of the bathroom, she just wailed because of what the message meant. And it literally meant, we're never going to give you a day's rest.
Yeah.
And we're going to beat you and batter you as best we can. And so she ran out of there and stuff, and, trembling and everything. And then, Vincent and Yvonne arrived shortly thereafter, and Yvonne, being the sensitive that she is, she said, she mentioned something just happened involving a mirror, and very, very sensitive woman. She's an amazing psychic, but, she went up and saw that and so forth, and she roamed the house to actually discern what's going on and where things are going wrong, which she immediately pinpointed where the boys had used that Ouija board exactly in the living room, this exact spot where the board had been centered, and that is where this vortex or stargate or wormhole or doorway was opened, interdimensional doorway, whatever you want to call it, and so it just got even worse, and we had, I don't know how much more detail you want me to go into. I guess I'm spoiling the whole story by telling you this case, but I wrote this case to warn kids about the dangers of Ouija boards. Nothing like this would have happened.
But let's talk.
All we had to deal with was this one earthbound human spirit who followed a little girl home from the cemetery, who actually turned out to be not that bad.
But did
he really just wanted to have his message told.
Okay, so these demons that came in through the Ouija board, were these demons identified?
One was identified by a name, and we never used the original name that was mentioned because you can call that thing right back into you.
Yeah.
Names are immensely powerful. That if you can learn a demon's name, and believe me, no investigator ever wants to try to learn what a demon's name is, and no demonologist and no psychic does. You leave that to the hardest heavy hitter clergy member that you can possibly get, and in this case, exorcist.
Right.
And so they know how to deal with it. So nobody, I don't proclaim to be an exorcist, or I don't proclaim to even be a demonologist. I've studied with one of the best demonologists in the world, Ed Warren, but not like it was intensive study where I'm with him every day of the week, that type of thing. I was just
so who was the one?
Mentors in one cases.
So then, who was the one that identified the demons in the house?
The name was not identified until this was in the chapel. So you don't ever want to call up. You don't ever want to. The only time you're trying to get a name is when you're trying to expel them using the rites in the Ritual Romanum, which are a part of the Ritual Romanum are the rites of exorcism. But frankly, I wasn't even there. I was in the house performing what we call sufumigation, which is something I specialize in, which is a Catholic ritual blessing the house using high church incense, ecclesiastical incense, frankincense, and myrrh, coupled with the 23rd Psalm and the Our Father and the Hail Mary, and you're basically fumigating against negative energy and negative entities. But I mean, these things were so vicious and going after everybody. Once one of the main interesting things was that they always lay low. So they basically challenged Matthew. Matthew challenged them, and they instantly went after him and just completely debilitated him. And these things can debilitate you and take a normal, healthy individual to critical status in days. In this case, it was just hours that he was just absolutely feeling like horrible flu symptoms and pneumonia symptoms and almost leprosy symptoms. And those things happen. They'll debilitate the body as best they can, and they're always doing it to attack God. They're never doing it to attack the human. They're trying to destroy the perfect human creation that God created because they're so immensely angry about the fall and what was done to them and so forth.
So, Jason,
they went after. Yeah.
Who was able to clear the house? Did you
I cleared the house.
You cleared
the house. Yeah. And Matthew was possessed, and he was basically collapsed in the hospital and became unresponsive. Well, when the demonologist learned of that, he of course became very suspicious and actually worked his way into the hospital claiming to be a doctor, but never revealing that he wasn't a medical doctor, but he was a doctor. And we talked to the medical doctor who said, he's been unconscious for such and such time, and he said yes. And he said, so he walked out, then they went into the room and they secured his arms using sheets, tying them to the metal rails of the bed, and putting a pillow behind his head and to the sides to pad the area, and basically said unconscious or unwilling to communicate. And the doctor said preposterous, right? And he said, really?
Yeah.
And he unclasps his crucifix from around his neck and walks around. He says, "Follow, please, doctor's looking at his eyes, and Vincent holds the crucifix above his forehead as the doctor's watching on, and there's no reaction, but then thick beads of sweat started to form on the hairline and all over the forehead. And, to witness this for the first time was absolutely horrific. And then his eyes shot open and just this blood-curdling, multiple voices projected at the same time in different octaves, telling them what that they can go do with themselves, and basically saying that this man is possessed, and no medical procedure is going to save him. And the doctors are saying, this is beyond what we can do. Nothing we're doing is helping him. You have our complete support. And nowadays, I think that would be almost preposterous because of all the litigation and medical attorneys and things like that to try to approve any kind of medical procedure or any kind of intervention and things like that. But this is back in the 90s, early 90s.
Uh-huh.
And so this is the point where they realize this man is in grave life-threatening danger, and preparing for an exorcism is also one of the most horrific things you can ever experience too. But this is when the bishop arrived the next day, and basically he'd been preparing. They fast for 3 days and pray, and basically make themselves as holy and as centered as they can be, and prepared for the exorcism of this man. At the same time, you're using the ritual Romanum and the priests and the exorcists and so forth to try to expel the demonic spirits from the man. At the same time, I had to make sure that the house was being blessed and fumigated, basically make it inhospitable for any kind of return.
Mm-hmm.
And of course having the portal or the doorway closed properly. But they opened with the Ouija board. Of course, the Ouija board had been destroyed. Well, they thought it had been destroyed. They basically torn it down this pit. The boys did.
Mm-hmm.
To get that out of their lives. And so it was basically a classic epic battle trying to find out and discover the demon's name, and to have them expelled and so forth. It turns out that only one had seized him, and expelling the others from the house, but then removing and expelling the demon, or exorcising the demon and removing it from controlling Matthew. And it was absolutely horrific. And there's one last realization as I sent the guys, Jimmy and Kyle, to go and get Vincent, who was in the church, in the chapel, and we needed to do a final full fumigation all throughout the house at the same time. Otherwise, they'd run the risk of having this demon that was expelled come right back into the house to continue its siege. That's why it's called Dark Siege. They're just laying siege to this family and to the house in general. So it was just an epic final conclusion to that, where they tried to go after, and they know that their time was short. There were seconds left, and went right after Vincent in the most profound way. And that really tied into what happened 2 months later, and how the demons actually found a way to come back after this family with a vengeance like we've never experienced before.
Oh my God! You mean just?
I'm sorry.
Oh my God! So after you cleared the house, the demons came back?
They went right after. Well, before they were finally expelled in the last fumigation, they went right after Vincent, and I don't want to spoil the story because it's a critical part to the case if anybody wants to get the book and read it. But they went after him in such a profound way that I was afraid they would almost end up killing him.
Oh my God! Because
we couldn't get to him; it was in the basement. So, what happened in that last final bit inside the house before they were expelled, and before they were expelled from Matthew, they left a mark like you can't believe. And that was actually a catalyst to how they were able to influence later events that happened 2 months after we thought we cleared the whole thing.
Oh my God!
Which takes place in the sequel, which is called Dark Siege: A Connecticut Family's. Dark Siege: The Nightmare Returns.
Oh my God!
It's absolutely fascinating. And the reason I wrote about this is because to warn kids about Ouija boards, but also how to empower yourself and how to protect yourself in a very profound way. The same way that I've been protected all of my life. I've never, ever experienced any attacks upon myself, yet witnessed all these things happening to all these people, and in many other cases, who don't know how to protect themselves in that way. And it's a very profound spiritualist lesson in spirituality, that's pretty profound. So we all approach this in an interesting way. I mean, you had the psychic Yvonne who used crystals, you had the demonologist, you had the bishop, you had myself who's a spiritualist, and also using Catholic means like the sufumigation and so forth. And all that group of people were really successful, and it was a very harrowing situation. And what happened in the sequel is absolutely just crazy.
Oh my!
Bishop James Long, who's with the old Catholic Church. He basically gave me a plug on Coast to Coast AM on Saturday night, and it's now required reading for his demonology class, and gave me a fantastic review, and that's in the sequel.
I love him. I really admire him, Bishop James Long.
Yeah.
I've interviewed him several times as well.
Amazing man.
Oh, he is. Now, there are so many people that use the Ouija board, and especially now with this new movie coming out, the Ouija. I don't know if that's going to scare the kids, or if they're just going to go out and buy the board just for the heck of it to see if anything happens. But everybody, wait a minute, Jason, everybody that uses the board, things don't always happen.
That's right. But you have to understand that they don't need to happen that night, the next week, the next month, the next year, the next 20 years, maybe not at all. But what about the next family that moves into the house where this doorway's been opened, and there happen to be just the right combinations of people with specific energy and electromagnetic fields and levels of awareness and psychic abilities or levels of protection or lack thereof that cause things to start to happen. And who can genuinely say, well, we've never used a Ouija board, and they really haven't. But yet, these things are occurring to them. So as investigators, we know that when you have demonic spirits, it either has to do with the land, that was previously where things happened, or rituals occurred there, or seances, or black witchcraft, or necromancy, or Ouija boards. There's always a reason. There has to be a reason these things were allowed to gain entrance into our dimension.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So if somebody comes in your home and they use the Ouija board, and they've used it on and off, okay, in the house, but nothing happens in your home, and so you're saying that if you ever sell your house, that there could be some bad spirits that are in the house that'll act up when the new people come in?
That doorway is open unless you close it or have the house blessed, or just simply, I just say thank you, Archangel Michael, for being here now and for closing any doorways or portals that were opened intentionally or unintentionally through the use of a Ouija board or seance or any kind of faculty of the mind. Because it's really your mind. You're using your free will to try to initiate a contact and open a channel of communication. So thank you. You thank the archangels for coming and taking care of that and closing it. And having your house blessed is fantastic to do, of course. Smudging and using high church incense, which is not only a physical smoke, but also a spiritual smoke, is essentially fumigating against negative energies and so forth. But yes, when you have a doorway open, the door, it's like the doorway is open. It's like you use the internet and you say, hey, I'm having a pool party. Come on over, right? Well, they may not, want to come over for the pool party right yet, but they have the address.
But,
so,
yeah, but the thing is, then why aren't they bothering the people that are currently in the home? Why are they waiting for the next owners to come in?
Because maybe they never even made a real connection with anybody or anything. But it's like having the best way to use, I'm trying to use it in simple terms, like you have like a wormhole, for instance, which is a connection from one point to another. So say we have a connection from have you seen Stargate, the movie? I like to use the Stargate analogy. You have a Stargate, and you dial into another dimension somewhere, and it opens on that end, but there isn't anybody lurking around near the Stargate. And maybe eventually when they notice it, they can say, oh, look, and they come through. And I think that's what's going on. I don't claim to know all the answers to everything, but I think that's what's really going on. You may have just never made the connection with another entity when you used it, so nothing happens. But the doorway could be open.
Really?
So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're talking about interdimensional planar physics and things like that, where you have all kinds of possibilities and probabilities going on, but also it's your intention. If you intend to initiate communication with a being of a dark nature, then your likelihood of doing so is much greater. If you say only beings of unity consciousness who are here for my highest good are allowed to communicate with me, and any being of separation consciousness who means me harm is forbidden to come in the name of Jesus Christ, I mean, that's a huge intention right there. But people don't use intentions. They just say, oh, are there any spirits here? If you want to lock in and say, I'd like to speak to my grandfather and only my grandfather, and I'd like to have the angels stand by my side and make sure that nothing else communicates with me, that's setting a pretty powerful intention too. But most people don't, because they really have no idea what they're doing, and it's sold as a game.
Well,
Parker Brothers.
Yeah. Well, I heard they came out with a new one too. I think it glows in the dark.
Oh, they have Barbie. I think they have Barbie glow in the dark and
pink ones. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Now, the thing is too, I've used the Ouija. Well, I've used the Ouija board, but I only did it because I didn't believe in it for one thing, and the person.
People say.
Oh, well, okay, but the thing is, I could put my hand on that planchette and the thing would never move. Never. Right. I could sit there for a year and it wouldn't move.
Well, that's what most people experience, thank God. But,
Well, you see, it was the other person I was with. It wasn't. I didn't move the planchette. The other person that I was with was moving the planchette. That's the way
it starts. I didn't move it. Did you move it? No, I didn't move it. Did you move it?
Well,
no. And everybody jokes around. But what if it's really, like I said, something else using your arms and your hands to move it? You're really saying, no, I'm not moving it, but there is another active intelligence moving it.
He was channeling.
It's your intention.
Well, he was channeling, and it was coming through him.
Yeah.
I know that. How do you get rid of a Ouija board?
Bury it in the ground and cover it with sea salt. Make a ring of sea salt around it with sea salt on top of it. Bury it face down in the ground. And thank the archangels for coming and taking it out of your life and for cutting away any connections you have with it and letting the earth transmute it and be done with it and seal it. And if you have holy water, make a cross over it and bury it in the ground and forget about it. And believe and say thanks. I believe in praying, as I talk about what's really interesting about my book, by the way, which we didn't really discuss, was a detailed chapter-by-chapter analysis, which is the final 100 pages of Dark Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, which is my beliefs growing up, the synchronistic events that led me to meet Ed and Lorraine Warren, my mentors and friends, my first cases on their behalf, my first cases with Ed in the demonic realm, my first empathic connection where I really picked up the emotions of this woman who had lost her body and on her way to go give birth and therefore had lost her child, and how that overwhelmed me and completely changed my life because it made me feel and understand what these discarnate human spirits are dealing with sometimes as far as an emotional level. I talked about the dangers of Ouija boards, of course, why I believe they're so dangerous, like we just discussed. What happens when we leave our bodies, to Dr. Raymond Moody's work, Life After Life. He's a world-famous hypnotherapist who studied tens of thousands of people who've gone back through near-death regression therapy, absolutely proving there's nothing to fear leaving the body. We're all going to do it, and it's a pity we're not all taught that. We're all going to leave our body, whether the body's mangled in a car wreck or is dying due to old age or gets blown up in an explosion or falls off a cliff. We're all going to be thrust out of the body. We'll be completely unscathed. No matter what happens to the body, we're completely unscathed. We're completely fine. We don't need eyeglasses anymore because that was a limitation of the body. We don't need a wheelchair anymore because we're not crippled anymore. And we'll all see a light and a tunnel of light, and most of us know to go directly through that light because that's why it opens.
Now the scientists don't believe that. What do they think, that there's something in our brain where?
No, there's the Proof of Heaven book, which was neuroscientists who actually were operating on one of their colleagues, and the colleague had his brain completely detached from his body, and came back with the most astounding stories. And all of his scientific medical doctor colleagues, neurosurgeons, said there's no way your brain created that. So you must have experienced it. And I think it's called Proof of Heaven, and it's mainstream science now. That they all admit that it's happened. Mainstream Russian scientists have now filmed the body, the soul leaving the body. And a German scientist has also now said publicly that there's about proof of the life after life. There's a lot going on now recently with the whole life after death thing. But anyway, you enter the field of light, the tunnel of light, into the next dimension. It's like a wormhole or a stargate, and people describe it as a tunnel or a doorway or whatever, or just a bright light. And but Raymond Moody studied everything through scientific study, near-death regression therapy. So anyway, and people choose to go through it or they do not. And most of the time when you do not, it's because you're afraid of judgment and damnation. If you were raised Catholic or Christian and you're afraid you won't be found worthy of the pearly gates. I can deal with being disembodied. I don't know what's through that tunnel. That could be hellfire for all I know. I'm not going to risk that. Or I want to go home. And instantly you're home.
So
I want to go get a bar. I want to go to the bar and get a drink. I can't get my alcohol or my drugs or my sex if I go through that light. So I want to go, get all that I can right now. So they go home or they go to the bar or wherever they want to go. But that's all you're dealing with when you're dealing with a ghost. Is any one of us, any one of the listeners here who've left the body due to any number of circumstances, found themselves to be completely aware. You can see and think and hear and reason just like you could when you're in the body, and you're back home. But the trouble is, you're vibrating outside of the limited range of the people who are in bodies, five senses to decode. They can't see you or hear you. Maybe they'll get a glimpse out of the corner of their eye, or they may hear a whisper or something like that. But when you go home, you're very frustrated because you have no physical body anymore, and I just call it a spacesuit to experience third dimension, and you can't affect the third dimension until you start to learn how to use energy like the ghost in the house did to move that stir stick cup off the bar. Because it's very lightweight. So you're really stuck, and you're stuck in between the third and fourth dimension. You have no purpose. You can't go to the bathroom. You don't need food or drink or sleep. You can't create anything because you can't affect the third dimension, and you can't create a piece of art or a song. You can't do anything. So you're really you're stuck in limbo. And my purpose as an empath is to go into these homes and help families deal with lingering loved ones in a very compassionate, respectful way, and help them try to initiate a dialogue, and to help them understand why this person who has left their body chose not to go into the light but instead went home, and how to best initiate a dialogue so the family members can make peace with the person who left their body and try to urge them to go through the light and tell them that everything's going to be fine and they love them and so forth. So I talked about that really phenomenal first time I did that in the chapter analysis section.
So there is a way then. There's a way then to try to communicate with the person that has passed on. Will they give them signs or let them know that they're there and that they're hearing them?
I can't tell you how many parents, being in Salem, Massachusetts here, from September 30th till now, I can't tell you how many parents I have talked to who tell me stories about their children who see apparitions inside the houses, young children. The grandfathers, or they're standing by the bed, or who's that man? I can't even tell you how many people have told me that their kids see ghosts all the time in the house and around, and they're all over the place. We're in a sea of vibration. All it is vibration. There's spirits all over the place.
Oh yeah,
and all you have to do, and this is one of the most important things. I helped cross a little 8-year-old boy in the hallway of this vendor hall that we were in, and he had a very dark form behind him, and the boy said, "Don't talk to me, he'll hurt you," referring to the dark form. And I said, thank you, Archangel Michael, for being here and for drawing your sword and for taking this dark spirit out of this boy's life forever, so be it. Thank you, Archangel Gabriel, for being here now and for taking this boy by the hand into the light. And I said, you can go. You don't need to be afraid. And they'll go. The trouble is with these spirits, whether they're children spirits or adults, is they don't remember or know, because they've never been taught, that they can call out for the light to open again and for them to be able to have that exit again. That you turn away from it once and it closes, and you think that's it. It is it, unless somebody comes and gets them from the other side, unless you act as an intermediary and say, and I try to talk to them. Like, I'll go to these haunted inns, these haunted hotels, and these haunted asylums and all these things, and I'll go in there and I'll talk to the spirits and I'll say, you don't need to stay here any longer. You can go into the light. You don't need to be afraid. There's nothing to fear. There's everything to gain by going through the light. And people say, don't cross my spirits who own the hotel. I think these aren't your spirits. These are human people. These are infinite fields of conscious awareness that once animated a physical human body, who are now trapped between dimensions because they don't know any better. They don't know they can leave. By trying to keep them there, that you can make money from paranormal teams coming in to try to get EVPs or photographs or something, is soul trafficking. It's not even human trafficking.
Oh, isn't that awful? I know.
Let's have these people leave.
Yeah.
They want to leave. If they don't know they can leave, but they'll all get the heck out of there if they want to.
But
what's a very interesting case is that when I did an investigation in Louisville, Kentucky, there was a spirit of a 15-year-old boy, and I told him, and people had, this one woman had dowsing rods, and every time I spoke, the dowsing rods, turned completely to face me. They wanted to hear what I had to say. And I said, you don't ever need to be afraid. You can go call for that light, and you can go into that light. And the response was pretty much, my relatives are here in spirit. And the whole family there, And so he's with his relatives here in spirit, but they're just lingering. There's nothing to do. So I said, you can go through that light and reconnect with the highest aspects of yourself. What's so fascinating is the people that leave their bodies and don't go through the light, maintain the same personality that they had in life, whether it's nasty or nice. They're the same. People that go through the light and then come back are always the ultimate highest expression of who that person could ever be.
Oh, interesting.
Amazing difference.
But the thing is,
infinite love, unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness. Don't worry about a thing. Everything is more beautiful than you could possibly imagine. This is just a schoolroom here for everybody to learn, and everything is absolutely beautiful. And don't worry about a thing. Versus, the personality that the people knew that person used to be. It's amazing.
But Jason, there's how many other spirits that are earthbound and don't go into the light, and if nobody finds them or is able to communicate with them, how long do they stay here then?
They stay until they can have the wherewithal to say, I'm done with this, please come get me. Or unless somebody from the other side, like a relative or an angel or a guide, comes for them. We can act as intermediaries on their behalf. You don't know how many people I've talked to in Salem who've come up to my table who tell me they have ghosts in the house or their house is haunted, and they don't mean them any harm, and it's kind of interesting to have them around, and they'll experience things here and there. I said, just talk to them and say, I'm talking to the people that are in this house who are in their spirit bodies, or I'm talking to the ghosts in this house, or I'm talking to, sometimes they even know their names, and talk to them and say, do you remember the time where you found that yourself outside of your body? And you're asking them to think about it. And they'll think about it. Yeah, I remember I was, hit by that bus, and I found myself outside of my body. Do you remember seeing a light, a tunnel of light, and maybe feeling afraid to go through that light, so instead you came back here? Well, yeah, I remember that. Well, that was really the proper exit. That was the way to go. That was the way to heaven, But so many people are guilt-ridden, they think they're going to get judged and thrown into the lake of fire, or they don't even know that they're dead, or they don't think they can get their addictions through that light, so they don't go. But so you can just talk to them and say, there's nothing to fear and everything to gain. It's absolutely beautiful. Call out for your parents. Call out for your grandparents. Call out for your angels. Call out for Jesus. However, and ask to be shown the way home. They have to use their free will to do it, or we can act as intermediaries and say, thank you, archangels, for being here now and for taking these spirits into the light if they so choose for their highest good. What can be more beautiful than that?
Okay.
You're invoking the angels to come take them for their highest good, and who wouldn't want to get out of this situation where you're stuck in between dimensions and you just can't? You're really a shadow of your own self. You're a ghost of your former self.
All right, Jason. So when we pass on, it's the third and fourth level if we don't move on, of the third and fourth dimension.
We're in the third dimension, and I believe it's the fourth dimension that we're going into, which is what that tunnel of light is. It's like a wormhole into another dimension, and if you don't go through it, you're stuck in between dimensions. So you're not interacting in the third physical dimension anymore, the third dimension, because you can't manipulate physical objects very well at all, and you're stuck.
Oh my God.
So the purpose is to help people cross through. And that, I tell you, I feel so much satisfaction when I know I've helped people cross over, or when I go into these, like this little boy, who was terrorized by this very dominating dark form, this dark spirit. That was probably just a very negative, dark spirit, a human spirit that was just manipulating him and stealing his energy and making him, do his bidding and things like that, and keeping him there out of fear versus going to be with his family. And but like the 15-year-old boy spirit I was telling you about, whose family was still around on this plantation, I said, whenever you feel afraid, or whenever you feel, alone, and you don't want to be here anymore, call out for the light. Call out for your angels, and you can go. And then you can come back and show your family how beautiful it is over there. When they see him completely revitalized, transformed, and empowered, they'll say, wow, I'm going to go. I want to be with you. So
what's the highest what's the highest dimension that we go into?
Oh, who knows?
Oh, you don't know. So if we're the third and then you go to the fourth, is there anything else after that?
Oh, definitely. I've heard at least 12. I heard like 144. I mean, the thing is, there's not only dimensions. Here's a mind-boggling thing. It's not only dimensions, but it's densities of vibration within those dimensions. So they're really dimensions within dimensions. And there's probability after probability. When you look at quantum physics and the number of infinite probabilities that you can experience, it's unending where you can go and what you can do. And, I say this, that they say we only use 10% of our brains, right?
Yes.
I say that we are infinite fields of conscious awareness, temporarily animating a physical body to experience the third dimension and experience the illusion that we're all separate individuals, when really we're all one, and we're all part of the same creator. And because we're so unlimited, and our physical bodies can only access 10% of who we really are. That's what I think the real situation is. Because we can only see 0.0025% of the electromagnetic spectrum, for instance, right? So we're practically blinded at that, and we don't even have sonar. Cats and dogs can see far more than we can see, and that's why your dogs will freak out or your cats will growl and look up, and they'll see things that we don't see, just like these kids will see things that we don't see. Like I said, I can't even tell you how many parents have come and said, want to hear a wild one?
Yeah.
This just happened to me today, just tonight. This woman came up to me and she says that my grandson claims to be my former husband.
Oh my God.
And talks to her current husband, who was their butler, like he's the butler. And Boston says, don't you talk to her like that. You need to be going and cutting the grass, or you need to make her a sandwich and stuff. And it's this little, 6-year-old talking to the new husband like he's still the butler. And it's like, it's amazing.
Oh my God.
And I told her, I said, do you know how amazing this is? That if he has memories of who your husband was, because he's the same consciousness, ask him questions that only the two of you will know.
Oh
and document it. That's an amazing story right there to have them be able to prove. And there's so many stories about kids remembering where they used to live, talking about, I think it was one person in the Middle East, one kid who went from one village to the next and went and knocked on a door and claimed to be the reincarnation of one of the other people that lived with them in that family, and told them everything they needed to know, and told them nicknames and family drama, and they literally just cried their eyes out and knew that this was the reincarnation of somebody who had passed due to old age.
Wow.
And how the new family and the old family are now so close and interacting in these ways because these kids are remembering, and that's part of this lifting of the veil. It's part of this entering the photon belts, our whole solar system, our whole galaxy is entering this photon belt, and all this amazing new age ascension stuff that's being discussed, and how we're becoming more psychic and more active, and the veil is spinning, and the kids are learning more, and all the animals are behaving, and they're advancing, and they're behaving in amazing ways. How many videos have we seen, at least I've seen on Facebook, of interspecies connections like you just cannot believe, like an eagle and a fox and a dog and a cat all together on a porch, interacting and feeding each other and licking each other, and the cat and the dolphin and the lion and the puppy, and all these different species that are just totally acting like the real sentient beings that they are, instead of this animalistic, behavior that you normally would associate them with. It's amazing to see what's really going on, and especially with kids, because the kids are remembering who they really are. And the cool thing is we don't ever die. The bodies die. Nobody in the history of the earth has ever died. We simply leave this body like a spacesuit, or like an old car. I say that when we leave our bodies, we don't care about the body anymore. It's like turning in our used car or a new car at a new car dealership.
Yeah,
take the coins out of the cup holder and take all the stuff out of the car, and you hand them the keys and you say, have at it. I don't care about this car anymore. I'm going to go get a new one.
But Jason, life is so wonderful. You can eat and cook and sing and listen to your favorite music. What is it like on the other side?
I don't know. I can't remember being on the other side as a ghost.
Have you ever asked a spirit, what is it like on the other side? Is it like...
You mean in between dimensions, or through the tunnel into the fourth dimension?
Well, the best level that we can go to. Would it be anything like...
the messages are always... even when people are... The most beautiful stories are those that are just going slowly. My grandmother's one of them, who was in her bed, and she hadn't seen or talked of her sister in 2 decades, over 20 years, and all of a sudden, Yolanda's here, standing at the foot of the bed, waiting for my grandmother to take her through.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And these people that go through, even when they're about to go, the most amazing thing is people who are about to go very slowly, without pain and things like that, their eyes are like galaxies. Their eyes are bright and full of light and stuff, and they're just like, they have this glow, and everything is it's so beautiful, my grandmother said. They can't even describe, words can't even, our vocabulary can't even describe the beauty of what awaits into this next dimension. And there's so many stories about that happening. It's incredible. We're all we're doing right now is having a little experience. We're not our bodies. We're not our names given at birth. We're not the names we call ourselves now. We're not our careers. We're not our accumulated wealth. We're not our strengths or our weaknesses or our diseases or our illnesses or any of that stuff, or the color of our skin or the shape of our bodies, any of that, our genders, any of that stuff. Those are just aspects of the current life experience we're having. We are infinite fields of conscious awareness, and we always will be. And we're this infinite field of conscious awareness, this immortal field of awareness, vacates the body when the body is no longer functional, goes through the tunnel of light into the next dimension, reevaluates itself, and judges itself. You judge yourself based on what you came here to learn, apparently. That's the latest series of messages. There's no judgment and damnation. You judge yourself. And if you found yourself that you didn't pass your own test, if I want to learn unconditional love, for instance, I'll come into an earthly existence. I'll pre-plan my life. Pick the parents that'll best allow this learning experience to happen. And I look at it like it's a giant MMO. It's a giant, massive, multiplayer online role-playing game. We design our avatar. We decide which planet we want to live on and which continent that'll best suit our learning needs. And we have certain skill points to use. We have certain class that we want to be. Do we want to be a doctor or a healer or a football player or a priest or just an office worker or a blue-collar worker or a homeless person? Those are all just parts of the experiences that we want to experience. So then we go and engage in this role-playing game. And when the game is over, we log out. We can decide whether we want to go play that same character again or log out of the game completely or just go play a different game altogether. And I think when the body is sleeping, our conscious awareness goes off and into these different densities and dimensions and interacts with other people in their true spirit form, and you pre-plan what you want to experience for the day. But back to the lesson, if I came here to learn unconditional love, I'll go into a family where I get physically beat up, or I just get, scorned and ridiculed by everybody else in my family, and learn to overcome and love them anyway, unconditionally, that they are. Not how they treated me, but I love them that they are. Unconditional love. I forgive you no matter what you did to me. And that's how I passed my test. It's really, we can get into really deep details, but there's a great book called Life Between Life, and it was stumbled on accidentally, but it's a scientific study through hypnosis. And there was a guy who was a Nazi prison camp machine gunner, and he mowed down thousands and thousands of people because that was his job. And his next incarnation, he was a doctor healing lives instead of stealing them. And there was another case of a man who was physically beat up by his father every day, and when his father ended up in the hospital and the life support was failing, this man, now an adult, had the opportunity to forgive his father and notify the nurse that his life support was failing and the tube fell out, and therefore succeed in his original mission or purpose, which was to learn unconditional love and pass the test, or let the man die and get his revenge for all the years of abuse, which is what he did. And when he finally crossed over, and this is all through hypnosis, and you basically are judged by your higher self and your guides, he was basically said that because you didn't pass this test and you didn't forgive your father, you need to be this man's son again. He's like, no way! And he ran away wherever you run away to, but then he felt a pull to have to go and right this wrong and go and live in another life experience in a physical body to learn the lesson all over again.
Wow.
And pretty wild stuff. So my message to everybody is this, is that if you're a loving, kind, compassionate person to everyone that you meet, to every animal that you encounter, to the earth, and to every form of life form that you can ever see, including insects,
Yeah.
you have a positive energy field, a positive polarity. You repel negative energies, you repel negative entities, you repel misfortune. You attract good people into your life, you attract good fortune and good circumstances, right? And then if you're a negative person and you're hateful and fearful and judgmental and nasty and cruel and full of all the negative emotions, you have a negative polarity. And because like attracts like, you attract negative people into your life, negative relationships, misfortune, and negative entities, because they're attracted to you. You repel good people, good circumstances, and good fortune. So if you're kind and loving and compassionate and non-judgmental, and you love everybody unconditionally, not based on what they do for you or don't do for you, then you're much, much better off. You're going to have a much more successful life and a much more fulfilling life, because through the law of attraction, all these good things will be attracted to you. and you'll repel to that. So when you pass by a cemetery, be love from your heart. I use the analogy that if God is the sun, we're all individual flares cast off from the sun. We have that flare within us in our core. It's a brilliant golden golf ball-sized field of energy. And if you can meditate and visualize expanding that golf ball-sized field of energy until it completely encompasses your entire body in a brilliant field of the golden light, and know and believe being the key, that this is God's love for you, and you can genuinely and really believe it and say, I am the light of God, I am the love of God, and believe it, then nothing of a lesser vibration is going to breach that field. And that's why I've always felt protected when I went into these demonic homes with Ed Warren. And for the first time, and I said, nothing's going to mess with me. I know who I am. I'm not going to go challenge anything and stick my finger in the hornet's nest and provoke anything, but I know who I am as the observer. I am the light of God. What can ever penetrate the light of God? Because I believe it, and faith and belief is the most important thing. So whenever you wake up in the morning, visualize yourself in this brilliant golden field of light, and know and believe that you're protected by the creator of all of the universe who loves you, and do it when you go to sleep, do it when you wake up. I tell kids, if you're going to get into a fight with someone, or you hear people arguing and you don't like a situation, beam them with love from your heart, and watch that transmute the whole situation. It'll diffuse the negative energy, and it'll actually be of immense benefit to everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's the secret. That's the secret of protection right there. Be as kind and as loving and compassionate as you can to everybody you meet, because everybody you meet is brought into your awareness specifically for you.
That's wonderful.
Amazing.
Yes, that's wonderful, Jason. Jason, thank you so much. Thanks, honey, so much for being on the show. Now, I have an image of you and your book. Do you want to tell them where they can get your book? I do have Amazon.com. Is there anything you want to say about your book?
Sure. My website is called darksiege.com, DARKSIEGE.com, and I have the book's available, autographed copies through my website. I sign them and personalize them, so I'll put like for Kenny, and anything else you want me to put on that. You can put that in the PayPal message screen, and then I autograph it and sign it and mail it out. Not that my autograph means anything really, because nobody's any more important than anybody else, but it's nice to have a book signed by the author. But I have info on the upcoming book that I'm doing called Our Journey Home, Guiding Spirits into the Light, which is full of all the beautiful cases of the similar situations that we were talking about earlier about helping people cross. Nothing scary at all. I have a handbook coming out, which is a smaller handbook to hand to people about people that are passing and people that have already lost relatives and things like that, and how there's nothing to be afraid of and no real reason to grieve. But on my website, I have some videos. I have some audio, radio, blog talk links. I have some videos I made about why Ouija boards are so dangerous. Merchandise tab. I have some really interesting and cool bumper stickers on there and so forth. But anyway, you can get the digital download of Dark Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, and my sequel, which is called Dark Siege, The Nightmare Returns, which just came out mid-September. They're both available on Amazon.com for Kindle, and then Barnes & Noble's Nook for digital downloads. And you can order the paperback through there as well. And I'm all about reviews. I have fantastic reviews. I have 101 reviews, almost all 5 stars, which are really great. And so if you do purchase the book and you want to keep in touch with me, you can send me a message at darksiegebook@gmail.com, darksiegebook@gmail.com, or the contact Jason tab on my website. And I'm always interested in hearing from people and their about their experiences and how they like the book or not. And much more. So I'm all, we're all in this together. We're all infinite fields of conscious awareness, and nobody's any better than anybody else. We all have our own experiences in our own levels of awareness and evolution. But, in reality, we're all just here learning what we came here to learn, and if we can help each other learn, that's great. And the most important thing to do is just remember that you are God's love and you're God's light, because you're created by the Creator, and that you can call upon the angels for protection by saying, thank you, Archangel Michael, for being here now and for defending me against these negative spirits, or thank you for taking these spirits into the light. meaning that you believe that it's already happened. Before you even finish your sentence, she's there with you immediately. That's anything you ask for in faith, you shall receive. So that's the main message I have for everybody, is you're never alone, and these angels are just a second away by thought. The minute you think of them, they're with you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. It was a pleasure to have you on my show. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and have a nice night, everybody.
You too. Thank you. Good night, Jason.
Night.
Good night. Oh, wow. Hey, guys. So, thanks, everyone. It was a long show. Oh, my gosh, an hour and a half. Thanks, everyone, for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. I could have made 2 shows out of that. He's very... I love his talk. Very awesome. It was wonderful. I would have loved to have turned that into 2 shows. That was fabulous. Everybody, thanks so much. I know it was a long show. I'm so sorry. And thanks for hanging with me. Next week, next Thursday, I have a historian. He's going to talk about the Valeska axe murders, and he has been investigating. Oh God, I think for the last 30 years, and he's even been trying to solve the murders. I'm really excited about having him on. It's Dr. Ed Epperly, and then after the show, myself and Dave and Anthony and I think Cindy and Nikki, they're going to join us, or we're going to do a live ITC session. And Anthony is going to introduce his new ghost apps, and I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a good October 30th, next Thursday. So same time, 6 o'clock, at my Pacific time anyway. So everybody, gosh, thanks so much again for joining me. I just love having all of you, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And I'll see you guys. Oh my gosh, that's my daughter.
Call from Bella.
Can you hold on for a second, Mimi? Hold on. I have a show. Hold on. Okay, so everybody. Thanks everybody. I see you all in chat. I've been seeing you on and off in chat. And I see, let's see, Royce and Unique Annie and her from England, and Butter and Carol and Lily, and I know Krista was there, and I know Dave was there, and Alexandria, and let's see, Ginger and Shelley and Cynthia, and let's see, Mary Dallas and Nicole, Night Lover, I Whip. I see you, honey. Thanks. Let's see. Femforce. I guess she must have left. Cindy left. And Callie. Andrew. Let's see. I'm trying to go back in here. I know some of you have left because it was a long show. Melissa. Chip. Danny. Oh gosh, I know I might have missed somebody because I'm trying to go back. Oh, and Pierre, wow, it's been a long time. And Junebug. Oh wow, everybody. Gee, thanks so much for being here. Some of you I haven't seen in a long time. Okay, I'm sorry if I missed anybody. Oh, Vicky. Hi, Vicky, and Tia, GB, everybody. Oh, and Janet. Okay, everybody. Oh, thanks so much. Hey, all right, so everybody, I'll see you next Thursday. We're going to have a great show next week, and I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. And so I'm going to say good night, and I'll see everybody next Thursday, and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much. Good night.